Welcome to another journey through time and circumstance, where we step into the relentless rhythm of one of the most polarizing figures of our era. Today, we're not traveling back centuries or millennia. Instead, we're diving into the present, into a day that unfolds somewhere between Silicon Valley boardrooms and Texas rocket facilities, where billion-dollar decisions stack up like digital notifications, and sleep is a calculated commodity rather than a luxury. You're about to experience 24 hours with Elon Musk, the man who wants to electrify every road, colonize Mars, wire human brains to computers, and apparently tweet through all of it. If you're joining us for the first time, this is a day long ago, except today isn't long ago at all. It's happening right now, somewhere in the sprawling landscape of American innovation and controversy. Before we begin, if you enjoy deep dives into the daily lives of historical and contemporary figures, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps us create more of these immersive experiences. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling us which innovator, leader, or historical figure you'd like us to cover next. Whether you're listening from Tokyo at midnight or Sao Paulo at dawn, we're glad you're here. Now, fair warning, this isn't a day of leisure, contemplation, or balanced wellness routines. This is a day engineered for output, compressed into 5-minute increments, fueled by caffeine and occasionally interrupted by chaos. Elon Musk's schedule makes most CEO routines look like spa retreats. He works somewhere between 80 and 100 hours per week, manages multiple revolutionary companies simultaneously, parents at least 14 children with various partners, and somehow still finds time to become one of the top-ranked Diablo players in the world. You won't find yoga sessions or mindfulness apps here. You'll find design reviews at dawn, meetings cut short mid-sentence, lunch devoured during engineering discussions, and a man who genuinely believes sleeping more than 6 hours is wasteful. So settle in, perhaps with your own coffee or energy drink of choice, because we're about to witness a day that defies conventional wisdom about work-life balance, challenges our assumptions about human capacity, and reveals what happens when someone decides that changing multiple industries simultaneously is more important than comfort, convention, or probably sanity. The alarm doesn't ring in any traditional sense. Instead, somewhere around 7 in the morning, in a house that might be in Austin, Texas, or perhaps a temporary dwelling near a SpaceX facility, or occasionally even a conference room where he crashed after an all-nighter, Elon Musk simply opens his eyes. There's no gradual awakening, no stretching beneath luxurious sheets, no gentle music easing him into consciousness. He wakes because his brain has processed its 6 to 6.5 hours of required recharge time and decided, with computational efficiency, that consciousness is now the optimal state. The first thing that happens before his feet touch the floor, before any thought of breakfast or bathroom, is the reach. His hand extends toward the nightstand where his phone sits, screen already glowing with the accumulated notifications of a world that never stops spinning. This habit, which he's publicly acknowledged as terrible and something he'd like to change, is also completely understandable when you consider that you're simultaneously running companies building electric vehicles, reusable rockets, underground tunnels, brain-computer interfaces, and one of the world's largest social media platforms. An emergency in any one of these domains could be waiting in that glowing rectangle. A rocket test that failed overnight, a production line that halted, a critical software bug, a brewing public relations disaster from someone's ill-advised tweet, possibly even his own from a few hours earlier. He scrolls quickly, eyes scanning for red flags among the hundreds of messages, emails, and notifications. Tesla's production numbers from the overnight shift, SpaceX's engine test data from Boca Chica, X platform metrics, news alerts about his companies, about him, about competitors, about markets, about governments. The world has been talking while he slept, and he needs to know what it said. This morning ritual, which takes perhaps 5 minutes but feels instantaneous, is triage. Not every problem needs his immediate attention, but he needs to know which ones might. An engineer at SpaceX might have sent a breakthrough solution to a combustion instability issue. A production manager at Tesla might need sign-off on a critical supplier change. A post on X might be spiraling into something that requires damage control. Finding no immediate 5-alarm fires, he sets the phone down, though it will never be far from his hand for the rest of the day. 6 hours of sleep. Musk has publicly discussed his sleep philosophy multiple times, explaining that he once thought he could function on less. During the most intense periods of Tesla's production challenges, during what he called production hell, he worked 120-hour weeks, sometimes sleeping on the factory floor, catching naps in sleeping bags stashed in conference rooms, existing in a state of perpetual exhaustion that he later admitted nearly broke him. The result wasn't superhuman productivity. It was diminished mental acuity, increased irritability, and decision-making that suffered from the fog of exhaustion. So he adjusted. 6 hours became his target, not because it's recommended by sleep scientists who usually advocate for 7 to 9, but because it's the minimum he's determined through self-experimentation that allows him to maintain mental sharpness. Any less, and he gets, in his own words, quite grumpy. Any more, and he feels like he's wasting precious hours that could be allocated to work. Now comes what he's described as the single most important part of his morning routine, the one habit he credits with having the biggest positive impact on his day: the shower. He stands, walks to the bathroom, and steps under water that's hot enough to steam the mirrors. This isn't just about hygiene. The shower's where ideas crystallize, where the problems his subconscious mind processed during sleep sometimes reveal their solutions. There's something about the white noise of water, the steam, the solitude, the simple physical sensation that creates a mental space for clarity. Some of his best ideas have come in the shower, solutions to engineering challenges that seemed impossible the night before, approaches to business problems that require unconventional thinking. Sometimes just the mental preparation for the tsunami of decisions that will hit him the moment he steps into the office. He said he literally doesn't feel ready for the day without this shower. It's not optional. It's not something he'd skip to save time. In a life ruthlessly optimized for efficiency, where lunch is optional and sleep is minimized, the morning shower is sacrosanct. 20 minutes of hot water and steam are worth more than an extra meeting or email session because they set the tone for everything that follows. He emerges, towels off, and now faces the question that millions of people ask themselves each morning, but with a twist that's uniquely his: what to wear. Musk's wardrobe is famously simple, almost a caricature of Silicon Valley practicality. Black t-shirt, jeans, sometimes a leather jacket if the weather demands it, or the event requires a slight upgrade. This isn't about fashion, it's about decision fatigue. Steve Jobs did the same thing with his black turtlenecks. Mark Zuckerberg with his gray t-shirts. When you're making hundreds of significant decisions every day, the clothing question becomes trivial overhead that can be eliminated through standardization. Dressed and physically ready, he heads toward what most people would call breakfast. Here's where Musk's approach to nutrition becomes clear, or perhaps intentionally unclear, depending on your perspective. He's been famously quoted, saying he'd rather eat tasty food and live a shorter life than optimize his diet for longevity. His mother, Mae Musk, is a registered dietitian who has advocated healthy eating for decades, which makes her son's dietary choices particularly ironic. Elon has publicly declared that he eats a donut every morning, not a carefully calibrated protein shake, not oatmeal with berries and nuts. A donut. He's tweeted this multiple times, almost defiantly, especially in response to health experts discussing the dangers of sugar. When a physician posted about sugar being poison, Musk responded with characteristic bluntness that he eats a donut every morning and is still alive. This isn't quite the full picture, though. While the daily donut is real, breakfast is often whatever's quickest and most convenient. Sometimes he skips it entirely, jumping straight into the day's work with nothing but coffee in his system. On days when he does eat, it might be a donut, or it might be an omelet if he has an extra few minutes, or steak and eggs when he's feeling more ambitious about protein intake. The key insight here is that food, for Musk, is primarily fuel rather than pleasure, and breakfast is the meal most likely to be sacrificed on the altar of productivity. He said before that if there were a way to not eat so he could work more, he wouldn't eat. That was during his most intense work periods, and perhaps represents an extreme he's pulled back from slightly, but it reveals the underlying philosophy. Eating takes time, and time is the only truly scarce resource. But coffee? Coffee is non-negotiable. He's described his relationship with caffeine as essential, though interestingly, he's also said that unless he drinks multiple cups, he doesn't feel a particular effect. This doesn't mean the caffeine isn't working in his system, just that he doesn't feel the jolt that some people experience. For him, the morning coffee ritual is about aesthetics and routine, as much as chemical stimulation. He enjoys the act of making coffee, the smell, the taste, the brief moment of ritualistic normalcy before the chaos begins. Lattes, he's noted dismissively, are just an excuse for adults to drink warm milk without sounding like babies, though he admits the art on top can be impressive. His coffee comes black or with minimal additions, consumed quickly while his brain is already 3 steps ahead into the day's priorities. During this morning window, on days when his children are with him, there's a brief but important shift in focus. Musk has at least 14 children with multiple partners, a family structure that's unconventional by any standard, and has been the subject of considerable public discussion and criticism. His custody arrangements are complex, varying by which children we're discussing and which relationship we're talking about. But on mornings when his kids are present, he takes time to ensure they're ready for school. He's been described as hands-on when he's available, though the key word there is when. His work schedule doesn't allow for daily school drop-offs for all of his children, but when they're with him, he makes an effort to see them in the morning, to be part of their breakfast routine, to send them off to their day before he fully dives into his own. This morning routine with his kids offers a glimpse of something approaching normalcy in a life that's otherwise anything but. He asks about homework, listens to their chatter about friends or games or whatever captures a child's attention. And for those moments, he's not the CEO of multiple companies or the richest person on earth. He's just a dad making sure his kids eat breakfast and have their backpacks. The children, some of whom attend Ad Astra, the experimental school he founded at SpaceX to provide a different educational approach than traditional schooling, have grown up in an environment that's both privileged and peculiar. They've seen rocket launches from exclusive vantages. They've ridden in prototype Teslas before the public knew those models existed. They've also had to navigate a father whose attention is perhaps the most competed for resource in the entire business world. By the time the children are off to school, by whatever means that happens on any given day, Musk is already transitioning fully into work mode. The phone has been checked dozens more times during breakfast and the morning routine. Emails have been answered in brief, often terse responses. Problems have been delegated. The 5-minute blocks of his calendar are beginning to tick forward, and with them, the intense, unrelenting pace that will define the next 14 to 16 hours. One of the small but telling details of Musk's morning routine is his commute, assuming he's driving himself rather than working from wherever he slept. As the CEO of Tesla, he naturally drives one of his company's vehicles, but which one varies. Some mornings it might be a Model S, the flagship luxury sedan. Other days, a Model X if he's got equipment to carry or kids to transport. Occasionally, a Cybertruck if he wants to test the latest iteration of the controversial angular behemoth that divides public opinion as sharply as its stainless steel edges. The commute itself, whether it's from his home to Tesla's headquarters in Austin, Texas, or to a SpaceX facility, or to whichever location demands his presence, is never wasted time. Musk has admitted he often uses this drive to consume information. He might be on a call with an engineer in Europe where it's already afternoon and a critical test is underway. He might be listening to an audiobook or podcast at accelerated speed, usually something related to engineering, physics, or business strategy rather than pure entertainment. More often, he's simply thinking, using the isolated space of the car to mentally organize the day's priorities, to consider solutions to problems that have been nagging at him, to prepare for the first of many meetings that will require split-second decision-making. This is also where the architecture of Musk's famously intense time management system becomes active. He uses a methodology called time blocking, specifically a variation he's popularized as the 5-minute rule. His entire day is broken into 5-minute segments. Every single one is allocated to a specific task or meeting. This isn't loose scheduling where you block off morning meetings or project work. This is military precision, where 8:15 to 8:20 a.m. is dedicated to reviewing a specific engineering report. 8:20 to 8:25 is a call about production line modifications. 8:25 to 8:30 is reviewing financial projections. The system sounds insane to most people because it is insane by conventional standards. But it serves several purposes that are crucial to Musk's operating model. First, it forces absolute clarity about priorities. When you only have 5 minutes for something, you can't waste time on tangential discussions or pleasant small talk. You get to the core issue immediately. Second, it creates a natural filtering mechanism. Tasks that aren't important enough to merit even 5 minutes of consideration are, by definition, not worth doing. They're delegated or eliminated entirely. Third, it prevents the kind of meeting bloat that kills productivity in most organizations. When everyone knows they have exactly 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, there's no room for the rambling preambles and redundant recaps that make corporate meetings notorious time sinks. This system also explains some of Musk's most controversial workplace behaviors. He's famous for walking out of meetings mid-sentence if he determines he's no longer adding value or receiving value. At Tesla and SpaceX, this isn't considered rude, it's expected. The culture he's built says that making someone stay in a meeting where they're not contributing is rude. Leaving to go do something more valuable is respected. This extends to frequency as well. Meetings that start as daily check-ins because of some urgent issue are expected to become less frequent as the urgency resolves. Musk has sent company-wide emails essentially commanding managers to reduce meeting frequency and size, to eliminate large meetings unless they're providing value to everyone present, to keep even necessary meetings as brief as possible. He's not interested in information sharing for its own sake. Email exists for that. Meetings in his framework exist only for collaborative problem-solving that can't happen asynchronously. By the time he pulls into the parking area at Tesla's Austin headquarters on this particular Tuesday morning, the 5-minute blocks are already stacking up like Tetris pieces. His phone shows back-to-back segments filled with color-coded entries. Red for critical decision meetings, yellow for engineering reviews, blue for financial discussions, green for external calls. There's virtually no white space, no buffer time, no padding for if something runs long. This is intentional. The system assumes perfect efficiency, which creates its own motivation to be efficient. If you waste 10 minutes, you're now 2 blocks behind, and catching up means either working faster or working later, both of which he's willing to do but prefers to avoid through discipline. The Tesla Gigafactory in Austin is a cathedral of manufacturing ambition, a sprawling complex where robots and humans collaborate to assemble vehicles at a scale that automotive industry veterans once considered impossible. Musk doesn't enter through executive entrances or get escorted to an isolated corner office. He walks through the production floor because that's where the real work happens. That's where problems reveal themselves, not in spreadsheets, but in metal and sparks and the controlled chaos of an assembly line, pushing the boundaries of what automation can achieve. The engineers and production managers know to expect him. His schedule, while time-blocked to the minute, follows weekly patterns. Tuesdays through Thursdays are typically Tesla days, devoted to the electric vehicle empire that made him famous and continues to be his most publicly visible company. This isn't ceremonial presence. Musk doesn't do ribbon cuttings and glad-handing unless absolutely necessary for regulatory or partnership reasons. His time at Tesla is spent on what he considers his most valuable contribution: design and engineering work. Approximately 60% of his time at Tesla, according to his own estimates, goes directly into design and engineering rather than traditional CEO activities like investor relations or corporate strategy. He's in the weeds, reviewing CAD models of new vehicles, arguing about material choices, questioning whether a particular assembly process is truly optimized or just traditional, because no one challenged it yet. This morning's first block takes him directly to an engineering meeting about battery thermal management in the upcoming vehicle refresh. The room is small, maybe 6 people maximum, because anything larger would violate his own rules about meeting efficiency. There's no polite small talk. No, "How was everyone's weekend?" The engineer leading the discussion projects thermal imaging data onto a screen showing heat distribution in battery packs under various load conditions. Musk listens for maybe 90 seconds, then interrupts. Not rudely, but directly, in a way that makes clear he's not interested in the presentation format, but in solving the problem. He asks about the coefficient of thermal conductivity in the cooling plate material. He questions whether they've considered a different flow pattern for the coolant. He references a paper published by a team in Germany 3 years ago about phase change materials that might be applicable here. This is Musk in his element, not as a businessman or celebrity or Twitter provocateur, but as an engineer who happens to also run companies. He has an undergraduate degree in physics and economics from the University of Pennsylvania, and while he never completed the PhD in energy physics he started at Stanford, his self-education in engineering through sheer obsessive reading and hands-on work has made him technically formidable. Engineers at his companies respect him because he can argue on technical merits, not just business cases. He's not a CEO who nods along to engineering presentations without understanding them. He's a CEO who will challenge your assumptions about material properties and expects you to defend your choices with physics, not politics. The battery thermal meeting concludes in its allotted 10 minutes, not because the problem is solved, but because the next steps are clear. One engineer is tasked with running simulations of the alternative cooling pattern. Another is assigned to source samples of 3 different thermal interface materials for testing. A decision point is scheduled for 2 days from now in another time block. This is efficient problem-solving, industrial-scale debugging of physical systems using the same iterative approach that software engineers use for code. Identify issue, propose solutions, test, iterate, no attachment to previous approaches if new data suggests better options. From the battery meeting, Musk moves directly to the production line itself. Here's where the 50,000-foot strategic vision collides with the grinding reality of manufacturing at scale. Tesla aims to produce millions of vehicles per year, which sounds straightforward until you consider that every single vehicle is composed of thousands of components that must arrive in precise sequence, be assembled by a ballet of robots and humans, be tested, be certified, and roll off the line meeting standards that satisfy both regulatory requirements and customer expectations. A bottleneck anywhere in this system cascades. A supplier delay in Romania affects final assembly in Texas. A software bug in the battery management system discovered in China requires an over-the-air update that must be validated before deployment. This is the complexity that Musk thrives in, the multi-dimensional optimization problem that his brain seems uniquely wired to navigate. He stops at a section of the line where doors are being installed on Model Y vehicles. The process looks smooth to an untrained eye, but Musk sees the micro-hesitations, the slight imperfections in the panel gaps, the extra second that the robotic arm takes to align the door properly. He calls over the production supervisor, asks questions. Why that particular motion path for the robot? Have they tried approaching from a different angle? What's the cycle time variation? And is it consistent, or does it spike at certain times that might indicate a part supply issue? The supervisor pulls up real-time data on a tablet, showing that, yes, there's a variation pattern that correlates with temperature changes in the facility. When it's warmer, the adhesive used in door sealing has different viscosity properties that affect placement precision by milliseconds. Musk nods. This is useful information. It suggests a solution space. They can control facility temperature more tightly, which costs energy. They can switch to a different adhesive with more stable temperature performance, which requires supplier negotiations and testing. They can adjust the robot's programming to compensate for the temperature-dependent behavior, which is elegant, but might mask the underlying issue. He doesn't make the decision on the spot because this isn't critical path and he trusts the team to analyze the trade-offs, but he's flagged it as something to follow up on if panel gap quality metrics don't improve in next week's production data. This kind of floor-level engagement is what Musk credits for Tesla's ability to innovate faster than traditional automakers. He's not removed from the actual manufacturing process. He sees the problems firsthand. He talks directly to the people grappling with those problems, rather than waiting for sanitized reports to flow up through layers of management. It means he sometimes gets mired in details that arguably a CEO shouldn't focus on, but it also means that when a change is needed, it can happen at the speed of his decision rather than the speed of bureaucracy. A design flaw that would take months to work through committee at a traditional automaker can be identified, solved, and implemented in days at Tesla, because the person with ultimate authority to make the change is standing there on the factory floor discussing thermal expansion coefficients with an engineer. The morning continues in 5-minute sprints, a review of upcoming Model 3 production numbers, a call with a supplier in Asia about semiconductor delivery timelines, a quick check of service center metrics because customer satisfaction data has been trending slightly negative in certain regions, and he wants to understand why. A discussion about the next generation of Tesla's autopilot hardware and whether the compute requirements justify moving to a new chip architecture. Each topic gets its allotted time, no more, no less, and then he's moving to the next block on his calendar. This is where the intensity of Musk's schedule becomes visceral. There's no transition time, no coffee breaks, no strolling to meetings while chatting with colleagues. It's back-to-back engagement, each block requiring him to context switch from manufacturing to supply chain to software to customer service, each requiring different knowledge domains, different decision frameworks. His mental model must constantly shift from thinking about physical production rates to software algorithms to market dynamics, often within the span of minutes. It's cognitively exhausting in a way that's hard to appreciate without experiencing it. Most people need time to shift between contexts, to close out one mental mode and open another. Musk has optimized this away through sheer practice and perhaps natural inclination. He can discuss battery chemistry, then immediately pivot to talking about production scheduling in China, then jump into a debate about user interface design for the vehicle's touchscreen system. The accumulated knowledge required to engage meaningfully across these domains is substantial. The mental agility to switch between them at speed is remarkable. Somewhere around what would conventionally be mid-morning, perhaps 10:30 or 11, an assistant or colleague might ask if he wants something to eat. Musk's relationship with food during work hours is utilitarian at best. He's been quoted saying that eating before meetings or during the workday often feels like an interruption to productivity rather than a necessary biological function. If he does eat something, it's grabbed quickly, consumed while reading emails or continuing conversations, barely registered as its own activity. A handful of almonds, which he's mentioned as a snack he keeps around. Maybe some jerky. Rarely anything that requires sitting down or using utensils or taking actual time away from work. This casual disregard for proper meals has consequences. Musk himself has acknowledged that he doesn't pay as much attention to nutrition as he probably should. Photographs of him shirtless on a yacht in Greece went viral and sparked body shaming that he initially dismissed with characteristic humor, but later admitted bothered him enough to make some changes. He's since talked about practicing intermittent fasting, using an app called Zero to track his fasting windows. He's lost over 20 pounds from his peak weight, not through careful meal planning or joining a gym, but through simply not eating for extended periods and being more conscious about avoiding food and alcohol in the hours before bed, which he says significantly improved his sleep quality. But during the workday, particularly at Tesla on a Tuesday morning that's bleeding into afternoon, food is the lowest priority. There's a cafeteria in the facility, serving employees various options, but Musk is far more likely to have something brought to wherever he is than to take 15 minutes to walk to the cafeteria, stand in line, and sit down. That 15 minutes is 3 5-minute blocks that could be spent solving problems. In his calculus, the trade is rarely worth it. He's optimizing for the immediate output of his day, not for the long-term maintenance of his physical system. It's a choice he's made consciously, aware of the costs, deciding that the mission justifies the sacrifice. Whether that's admirable dedication or concerning workaholism depends largely on your perspective about what individuals owe to themselves versus what they might owe to their visions of changing the world. By noon, Musk has already been actively working for 5 hours, packed with more decisions and context switches than most executives encounter in a full day. But he's nowhere near done. The afternoon stretches ahead, and while the location might change, the intensity will not. The Tesla portion of the day is far from over, but the beauty or tyranny of Musk's schedule, depending on your viewpoint, is that every segment is planned. The next block involves financial reviews, then a call with Tesla's Shanghai team where it's already evening, then a session on the Cybertruck's production ramp schedule. The calendar is a mosaic of commitments that leaves almost no room for spontaneity, but Musk would argue that's exactly the point. Spontaneity is expensive when you're trying to revolutionize multiple industries before time runs out. Meetings at Tesla under Musk's regime are legendary, and not always for flattering reasons. They're intense, efficient to the point of feeling rushed, and governed by rules that would seem harsh in most corporate contexts, but make perfect sense within the framework he's trying to build. Understanding how he runs meetings is essential to understanding how he gets so much done, despite having the same 24 hours as everyone else. The core philosophy is ruthlessly simple. Meetings are overhead. They're not where work happens. They're where you coordinate so that work can happen more effectively afterward. This fundamental assumption drives everything else. Most companies treat meetings as the work itself. Managers attend 8 hours of meetings and consider that a full productive day. Musk sees this as a pathology, a disease that kills companies through 1,000 cuts of wasted time. His famous email to Tesla employees laying out meeting rules has been widely circulated and analyzed. The rules are deceptively simple but transformative if actually implemented. No large meetings unless they're providing value to everyone present, and even then, keep them short. Eliminate frequent meetings unless dealing with an extremely urgent matter, and frequency should drop rapidly once the urgent matter is resolved. Walk out of a meeting the moment you realize you're not adding value, because staying and wasting time is what's actually rude, not leaving. These rules create a culture shock for new employees coming from traditional companies. At Tesla or SpaceX, junior engineers are empowered, almost required, to leave meetings if they're not contributing or learning something valuable. There's no social obligation to sit through presentations that don't concern your work. You're expected to manage your time like the precious resource it is. This initially feels uncomfortable because we're socially conditioned to view leaving early as rude. But once people adapt, the change in productivity is dramatic. Meetings that would drag on for an hour at other companies get compressed to 15 minutes because everyone knows the expectation is efficiency. Participants come prepared because showing up unprepared wastes everyone else's time, which is unacceptable. Musk himself models this behavior aggressively. He's been known to walk out of his own meetings if he decides they're no longer productive. A manager giving a presentation might be mid-sentence when Musk simply stands up and leaves because he's extracted the necessary information, and the rest is redundant detail he can get from reading the summary later. This seems shockingly rude from the outside, but within Tesla and SpaceX, it's understood as efficiency, not disrespect. The manager isn't offended because they understand the context. Their CEO values his time precisely, and by extension, they should value their time the same way. The unspoken message is that everyone's time matters too much to waste on unnecessary ceremony. The size rule is equally important. Musk prefers meetings with no more than 4 to 6 essential people. Research supports this, with studies at Stanford and elsewhere showing that meeting productivity declines sharply once you exceed 8 participants. The more people in the room, the less each person can contribute, the more diverse the interests and needs, the harder it is to reach decisions. Large meetings devolve into presentations where information flows one way, which is exactly what email is for. If you need to inform 20 people of something, write a clear email. Don't schedule an hour of 20 people's time, which is actually 20 hours of aggregate human effort, just to accomplish one-way information transfer. This efficiency mindset extends to how meetings are structured when they do happen. There's typically no small talk. The meeting starts when the clock hits the scheduled time, not 5 minutes later after everyone's settled and someone's told a joke. There's an agenda, even if it's informal, and that agenda gets addressed directly. Tangents are shut down. Off-topic discussions are redirected to separate follow-ups. Decisions are made in the room, or if a decision needs more information, the specific next steps to get that information are assigned with clear ownership and deadlines. Every meeting ends with action items, and those action items have names attached, not vague department assignments. When everyone knows that Dave is responsible for getting the simulation data by Thursday, accountability is clear. This system requires buy-in from everyone involved. It only works if participants embrace the philosophy and police themselves and each other. That's easier at SpaceX and Tesla, where Musk's culture is deeply embedded, than it would be in most organizations where corporate culture prizes consensus building and inclusive process over speed. There's also a cost. The system is exhausting. It demands constant vigilance about whether your time is well spent. It creates pressure to have answers quickly, rather than to ponder and discuss. Some people thrive in this environment, energized by the pace and the stripped-away bureaucracy. Others find it stressful to the point of burnout, feeling like they can never slow down, never have a meeting where it's okay to explore ideas without immediate productive outcomes. During a Tuesday afternoon at Tesla, you might find Musk in back-to-back meetings that exemplify these principles. A design review for the interior of an upcoming model runs its allocated 20 minutes, 8 people in the room. Industrial designers, materials engineers, the lead program manager, and Musk. They've prepared extensively because they know he'll ask pointed questions about decisions they've made. Why this particular grain for the dashboard material? What's the cost delta versus the alternative? Does it meet flammability standards in all markets? How does it hold up to UV exposure over 5 years? These aren't gotcha questions. They're the questions that need answers. If the team has done their homework, the meeting is productive. If they haven't, it becomes uncomfortable quickly, but that discomfort is the incentive structure teaching people to prepare. The design gets approved with 2 minor modifications that are decided in the moment, not sent off to a committee for further study. Next meeting, production engineering. An issue with the assembly sequence for battery packs. Robots are having trouble with a particular welding step. 10 minutes allocated. The engineers propose 3 possible solutions, having already run preliminary tests on each. They present data, not opinions. Musk asks why they didn't consider a 4th option involving a different welding technique. Brief discussion reveals that option has downsides they hadn't fully considered, but might still be worth testing. Decision. Test all 4 approaches over the next week, reconvene with data, make final call then. Meeting adjourned in 11 minutes, 1 minute over budget, but the next meeting's participant was late anyway, so it absorbs into the buffer. This is how progress happens at Musk's companies. Not through perfect meetings that magically produce answers, but through disciplined iterations where each meeting makes the next decision possible. Problems get broken down into solvable chunks. Tests get run. Data drives decisions. When you're wrong, you find out quickly and adjust. There's no room for ego-driven attachment to ideas that don't work. The physics doesn't care about your pride. The customer doesn't care about your intentions. Either the product works or it doesn't, and the meeting structure Musk insists on is designed to expose truth as rapidly as possible so that corrections can happen while there's still time to matter. Critics argue this approach is too harsh, that it doesn't value the human elements of collaboration, that it treats people like cogs in a machine optimized for output. There's validity to these concerns. The pace Musk demands isn't sustainable for everyone, and turnover at his companies is higher than industry averages, particularly in roles that require sustained intense effort. But defenders counter that people who work at Tesla and SpaceX know what they're signing up for. These aren't jobs you stumble into. They're positions people actively seek because they want to work on hard problems at the edge of what's possible. The trade-off: accepting brutal pace and high expectations in exchange for working on electric vehicles that are genuinely better than gas cars, or on rockets that actually land themselves and get reused, is one that many engineers find worthwhile even if it costs them sleep and stress. By mid-afternoon on this Tuesday, Musk has cycled through perhaps a dozen meetings, each following these patterns. Some are technical deep dives. Others are higher-level strategic discussions about market positioning or regulatory approaches or partnership opportunities. But all of them share the same DNA: tight time limits, direct communication, decision-making authority in the room, and an expectation that participants will focus on moving the ball forward rather than on preserving egos or maintaining political alliances. It's exhausting to sustain, but it's also why Tesla can announce a new model and have it in production months later, while traditional automakers need years to do the same. The speed comes not from working harder, though they do that too, but from working with dramatically less friction. Every eliminated meeting, every hour saved by cutting through bureaucracy, compounds into an advantage that manifests as faster product cycles and quicker responses to market conditions. The afternoon at Tesla is winding down in the sense that the scheduled blocks are shifting from internal meetings to external calls with partners and stakeholders, but Musk's energy level remains steady. He doesn't show obvious fatigue, or if he does, he powers through it with the same grim determination he brings to everything else. The 5-minute rule marches on, indifferent to human limits, and he marches with it because this is the system he created and believes in, the engine that allows him to operate multiple companies at once. Critics can call it unhealthy, and they might be right, but it's undeniably effective at converting human hours into forward progress on problems that matter to him. The question isn't whether his meeting philosophy is pleasant. The question is whether it works. And by the metric of results, the rocket landings in the electric vehicles, and the market disruptions, it's hard to argue that it doesn't. As the designated Tesla hours of this particular Tuesday slide into evening, there's a transition that happens, though not really a break. Musk doesn't clock out at 5 p.m. and decompress. The concept of work-life separation, which occupational psychologists and management consultants spend entire careers advocating for, simply doesn't exist in his framework. Instead, there's a shift in which company gets his focus. On this Tuesday evening, like most evenings except when he's in transit or dealing with an emergency, he stays loosely in Tesla mode, but begins looking ahead to tomorrow or the next crisis that needs attention. But first, there's the question of dinner, which for Musk is where most of his daily caloric intake happens. This isn't by design so much as by consequence. He's skipped or minimized breakfast and lunch, sacrificing meals to the god of productivity. But evening? Evening is when the day's intensity makes hunger undeniable. It's also when social obligations intersect with nutritional needs. Business dinners are a regular feature of his schedule, opportunities to meet with partners, investors, suppliers, government officials, or other tech leaders in a setting that's slightly more relaxed than a conference room. Though calling any meal with Elon Musk truly relaxed would be overselling it. On nights without business dinners, his preferences lean towards certain reliable categories. He's mentioned loving sushi, which makes sense for someone who values efficiency even in eating. Sushi is pre-portioned, quick to consume, protein-dense, and available at high quality in cities where he spends most of his time. Steak and eggs is another favorite, a high-protein, low-carb combination that echoes the eating patterns of people treating food primarily as fuel. There's something almost symbolic about steak and eggs being his power meal, the most efficient calorie and protein delivery system short of drinking meal replacement shakes. He's talked about favoring medium-well steak cut into strips, which again optimizes for ease of eating rather than culinary ritual. French food and barbecue round out his stated preferences, both cuisine types that prioritize rich, satisfying flavors over health optimization. Then there's the Diet Coke situation. Musk has been remarkably public about his Diet Coke consumption to the point where it's become part of his public persona. He's claimed that Diet Coke has some infernal ingredient that keeps him going. He's admitted that he drinks it in quantities that might take years off his life, but he's okay with that trade-off. This isn't just beverage choice, this is philosophy. He's selecting short-term function over long-term optimization. Diet Coke contains caffeine, though not as much as coffee, and the ritual of consuming it throughout the day provides punctuation marks of stimulation that help sustain energy through the marathon work sessions. The aspartame and other artificial sweeteners are controversial from a health standpoint, and Musk's mother has publicly expressed concern about his Diet Coke consumption, but he persists because it works for him, because he enjoys it, and because sacrifice for hypothetical longevity benefits decades from now feels less important than maximizing output today. This evening, let's imagine he's having a business dinner with a potential partner for Tesla's charging network expansion. The location is probably somewhere convenient, but not ostentatious. Musk isn't particularly interested in being seen at the right restaurants for social capital. The food isn't the point. The meeting is the point, and it happens to involve food because humans eat, and multiple hours of conversation are more pleasant with sustenance. He'll order efficiently, probably steering towards something protein-heavy that won't leave him feeling sluggish afterward. The conversation will range across topics: the technical challenges of fast-charging infrastructure, the economics of network expansion, regulatory frameworks in different countries, competitive threats from other charging solutions, and probably several tangents into physics or engineering, because Musk can't help but engage technically even in business conversations. His dining companions might find the experience exhilarating or exhausting or both. Musk is intensely present when he's engaged with a topic that interests him, firing off questions, challenging assumptions, extrapolating second and third order consequences of proposed strategies. But he's also prone to distraction if the conversation veers into territory he finds boring or redundant. His phone remains accessible, and he'll check it if something urgent comes through, which to some might seem rude, but to him is simply practical prioritization. The notification that a rocket test in Texas just completed successfully, or that a production line in Berlin hit a milestone is objectively more important than uninterrupted eye contact during a discussion about charging station placement strategies. The meal might be accompanied by whiskey or wine, which are his stated preferences for alcohol. Not beer, which he's less interested in despite having sold some limited Tesla-branded brew as what amounted to a science project novelty. Whiskey, specifically, which given his use of American spelling suggests Irish or American varieties rather than Scotch, though he's not been particularly public about brand preferences. A glass or two with dinner, enough to take the edge off without impairing the mental sharpness he'll need for whatever work awaits after the dinner concludes. Because of course, there's more work. There's always more work. The intermittent fasting he's adopted means he's strategic about when he eats, trying to compress his eating window to allow longer fasting periods. He's mentioned avoiding food for at least 2 to 3 hours before bed, which means if he's planning to sleep around 1 a.m., he needs to be done eating by 10 or 10:30 p.m. at the latest. This evening meal, whether it's a business dinner or just grabbing something at the facility, represents his main food intake. Tomorrow he'll wake up and the cycle repeats, perhaps with another donut, perhaps with nothing until much later in the day when hunger becomes impossible to ignore. There's something almost monastic about this approach to food, stripping away the social and pleasurable aspects to reduce meals to a functional necessity. But Musk would likely counter that he does enjoy food when he eats it. He just doesn't let that enjoyment dominate his time allocation. The world has limited time to address climate change through electric vehicle adoption. Humanity has limited windows to become multiplanetary before catastrophe or stagnation makes it impossible. Neural interfaces need to be developed before the gap between human and artificial intelligence becomes unbridgeable. These urgencies, in his framework, make leisurely 3-hour dinner experiences self-indulgent wastes of precious time that could be spent solving problems that actually matter. After dinner concludes, usually by 9 or 9:30 p.m., Musk heads back to wherever he's working from. Or if the evening is structured differently, perhaps he goes home to spend time with whichever of his children are with him that week. The custody arrangements are complex enough that detailed discussion would require its own extended exploration, but the relevant point is that on evenings when his kids are present, he makes effort to see them before they go to bed. It's not always possible. Sometimes work emergencies or travel demands make it impossible. But when he can, he shows up. He's described himself as a pretty good dad, noting that the kids spend slightly more than half the week with him and that he spends a fair bit of time with them. He also takes them on trips to his factories to see rockets and cars being built, on annual camping excursions, exposing them to the world he's creating in a way few children ever experience. But the evenings, especially on nights when the kids aren't with him or after they're asleep, slide back into work mode with remarkable ease. The day that started at 7 a.m. with a phone check continues seamlessly into night hours that most people would consider personal time. For Musk, the distinction barely exists. If he's awake, he's working, or he's doing something that relates to work, or he's resting so he can work more effectively tomorrow. The calendar's 5-minute blocks officially end at some point, but his brain doesn't turn off. Problems that emerged during the day continue percolating. Solutions that evaded him during official work hours sometimes crystallize when he's technically off duty. The boundaries are porous by design. Monday and Friday mornings find Musk in a different headspace and physical space than Tuesday through Thursday. Those days are SpaceX days, and that means a completely different set of priorities, challenges, and work environments. The company cultures of Tesla and SpaceX are similar in their demanding intensity, but different in their fundamental missions and the technical domains they operate within. SpaceX is trying to make humanity multiplanetary, which is an absurdly ambitious goal that requires solving engineering problems no one has ever solved before. That changes the flavor of how days unfold there. The locations vary. SpaceX's headquarters are in Hawthorne, California, a sprawling complex where rocket engines are designed, tested, and manufactured. But increasingly, the center of gravity has shifted to Starbase in Boca Chica, Texas, near Brownsville at the southern tip of the state, where the massive Starship vehicles are being developed and launched. This is the rocket that's supposed to carry humans to Mars, and more immediately, to carry payloads and eventually people to orbit and back more cheaply than has ever been possible. Musk spends significant time at Starbase because it's where the hardest problems and most rapid iteration are happening. When he's there, he's not staying in luxury hotels. He's been known to sleep in a tiny house on the property or in temporary accommodations on site because being close to the work matters more than comfort. Walking around a SpaceX facility, whether in California or Texas, the first thing that strikes you is the sheer ambition made physical. These aren't conceptual designs or PowerPoint dreams. These are actual rocket engines being assembled, test-fired, torn down, improved, and assembled again. The iteration speed is breathtaking compared to traditional aerospace, where programs run for decades and failures are catastrophic because of the immense costs and long timelines involved. SpaceX embraces a different philosophy, one that comes directly from Musk's worldview. Fail fast, learn, iterate, build prototypes quickly, test them. When they blow up, and they will blow up, understand why and fix it in the next version. This approach was heresy in traditional aerospace when SpaceX started. It's now becoming the standard for how rapid development happens. Musk's time at SpaceX is even more heavily weighted toward engineering work than at Tesla. He said that approximately 90% of his time at SpaceX is spent on design and engineering. This isn't just marketing spin. He's deeply involved in technical decisions about rocket engines, propellant flow rates, structural materials, aerodynamics, avionics, landing systems. He doesn't have a formal engineering degree in aerospace, but he's essentially given himself a master's education through obsessive reading and hands-on work. Engineers who work with him report that he can hold his own in technical discussions, that he asks questions that reveal genuine understanding of the underlying physics and engineering trade-offs. A Monday morning at Starbase might begin with Musk walking through the production area where Starship vehicles are being stacked. These are massive stainless steel cylinders, taller than buildings, being welded together by teams working around the clock. He stops to talk with welders, asking about the quality of seams, whether they're experiencing issues with a particular welding wire or technique. He looks at where heat shields will be mounted, questions whether the attachment system is robust enough to survive the thermal and mechanical stresses of re-entry. These aren't ceremonial walkabouts. He's gathering information, seeing firsthand where problems might exist before they become launch failures. From the production floor, he might move to a design review meeting for the next iteration of the Raptor engine, the methane-fueled rocket engine that powers Starship. The engineers present data from the most recent test fires, thrust levels, combustion efficiency, any anomalies in the temperature profiles or vibration signatures. Musk dives into the details. What's the specific impulse compared to the theoretical maximum? Are they losing efficiency somewhere in the expansion nozzle? Has anyone considered adjusting the fuel-to-oxygen ratio to see if they can squeeze out more performance? These conversations get technical fast. There's talk of injector plate designs, turbo pump speeds, regenerative cooling channels, topics that would lose most people immediately, but that Musk navigates with apparent ease. The meeting might reveal an issue. Engines are experiencing slightly lower performance than models predicted, and no one's entirely sure why. This is where first principles thinking, the problem-solving approach Musk frequently advocates, comes into play. Instead of accepting the engines aren't performing as well as expected as the problem statement, he pushes the team to decompose the problem. What exactly is underperforming? Thrust? Efficiency? Both? If efficiency, where is energy being lost? Incomplete combustion, heat transfer issues, flow irregularities? By breaking the problem into components, you can test hypotheses systematically rather than trying random fixes. Someone suggests that maybe they need more test data before making changes. Musk's response is immediate and predictable. How fast can we run another test? The answer comes back: 2 days to prepare, assuming no complications. His counter: what if we accept higher risk of failure and test tomorrow? The engineers exchange glances. It's faster than they're comfortable with, but Musk's point is that the real risk is delay. Every day Starship isn't operational is a day humanity isn't becoming multiplanetary. The acceptable risk threshold is higher than traditional aerospace allows because the stakes are higher. They agree to push for a test the next day with specific monitoring in place for the suspected problem areas. This aggressive timeline, this willingness to test before everything is perfect, is quintessentially Muskian and quintessentially SpaceX. Traditional aerospace programs would spend months analyzing data and running simulations before attempting another test. SpaceX runs the test, collects real data, and iterates. This has led to some spectacular explosions, footage of rockets crumpling or detonating that gets widely shared and mocked. But it's also led to reusable rockets landing themselves vertically, something that seemed like science fiction until SpaceX made it routine. The philosophy accepts short-term failures as the price of long-term success. The SpaceX days are similar to Tesla days in structure, governed by the same 5-minute blocks, the same ruthless meeting efficiency, the same expectation of preparation and focus. But the content is different. At Tesla, you're optimizing existing technology for mass production. At SpaceX, you're inventing new technology that's never existed before. At Tesla, failure means recalls and bad press and financial costs. At SpaceX, failure means explosions and sometimes loss of incredibly expensive hardware, but it's built into the development model. These different risk profiles create different cultural nuances even within Musk's overall demanding framework. Monday at SpaceX might also include time on Starlink, the satellite internet constellation that's become a major business for the company, generating revenue that helps fund the Mars ambitions. Starlink requires its own engineering focus, satellite design, orbital mechanics, ground station networks, user terminal development. Musk reviews performance metrics. How many satellites are currently operational? What's the customer growth rate? Are there bottlenecks in terminal production? Any regulatory issues in new markets? This is the business side of SpaceX, the part that has to work commercially to fund the exploratory side. It's less romantic than Mars rockets, but equally important to the overall mission. Lunch on a SpaceX day is even more likely to be skipped or grabbed on the fly than on Tesla days. There's a cafeteria at the Hawthorne facility, but at Starbase, the options are more limited, and Musk is more likely to have someone bring him something while he keeps working. Food remains functional fuel, not a highlight of the day. If someone asks what he wants, the answer is whatever's fast and protein heavy. A burger from a local spot, tacos from one of the food trucks that serve the Starbase workers, Chinese takeout if someone's making a run. He eats while continuing to work, scrolling through data on a laptop or discussing problems with whoever happens to be nearby. By afternoon on a SpaceX day, Musk might be dealing with regulatory issues, which in the space industry are considerable. The Federal Aviation Administration has authority over launches. Environmental groups have concerns about wildlife impacts from the Starbase facility. Local communities have mixed feelings about having rocket launches in their backyard. International regulations govern satellite communications. All of this creates friction that Musk finds enormously frustrating but has to navigate. He's been publicly critical of what he sees as excessive bureaucracy slowing down space development, arguing that the regulatory framework was designed for an era when launches were rare government affairs, not for a future where commercial space activity is frequent and innovative. These regulatory discussions are where his impatience shows most clearly. He wants to launch often, test aggressively, fail, and fix quickly. Regulators want environmental assessments, safety reviews, public comment periods, all of which take time he feels humanity doesn't have to waste. The tension is real and sometimes boils over into public disputes, tweets criticizing the FAA, media statements about bureaucratic obstacles. But ultimately, he has to work within the system while trying to change it, which means meetings with regulators, submissions of endless paperwork, compromises that slow down progress in exchange for permission to continue. A typical Monday at SpaceX might involve a call with FAA officials about the approval process for the next Starship launch window. Musk's participation is direct. He asks why certain requirements exist. He proposes alternatives that might address safety concerns while allowing faster approvals. He pushes back on what he perceives as unnecessary delays. The regulatory officials, who are used to more deferential aerospace companies, sometimes find his approach abrasive. But they also recognize that SpaceX is pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and that requires some flexibility in how regulations are interpreted and applied. It's a delicate dance, and not one that Musk particularly enjoys, but it's essential to SpaceX's ability to operate. The afternoon continues with more meetings, more design reviews, more problem solving. Every topic connects back to the central question: how do we make life multiplanetary? Every technical decision, every cost trade-off, every schedule negotiation flows from that North Star. It makes prioritization clearer in some ways. Does this decision move us toward Mars? Yes or no? If yes, how quickly and at what cost? If no, why are we discussing it? This clarity of mission is powerful. It allows SpaceX to say no to opportunities that other companies would pursue because those opportunities don't align with the core goal. By evening on a SpaceX day, Musk is likely still at the facility, especially if he's at Starbase where living accommodations are minimal and the line between work and life is basically non-existent. He might walk out to look at the assembled Starship standing under floodlights, a gleaming metal tower that represents years of work and billions of dollars of investment in the hopes of making humanity multiplanetary. It's both humbling and energizing. Humbling because the engineering challenges are immense and success is never guaranteed. Energizing because it's real, it's happening. They're actually building the thing that could carry humans to another planet. There's a quiet moment, rare in his schedule, where the immediate 5-minute blocks recede and the larger purpose comes into focus. Then, his phone buzzes with the next crisis or opportunity or question, and the moment passes. Back to work. When Musk's official work blocks finally wind down, usually somewhere between 9 and 11 p.m. depending on the day's particular demands, there's a transition that happens. Not a shutdown exactly, because his brain doesn't have an off switch that neatly separates work from personal time. But there's a shift toward activities that aren't directly productive in the business sense, things he does for himself rather than for the companies. This is where we glimpse the person behind the CEO persona, though even here, the boundaries remain blurry. Video games are his primary form of relaxation, and he's been remarkably open about this. In interviews, he's explained that his mind is constantly active, what he describes as a storm that doesn't stop. Most people, he suggests, wouldn't actually want to be inside his head even if they think they would. The relentless processing, the constant optimization, the inability to just be without thinking about problems and solutions. It's exhausting in ways that aren't immediately obvious from the outside. Video games provide a specific type of relief. They give his mind something to focus on that's completely separate from work challenges. Killing demons in a video game, as he puts it, calms the demons in his mind. His game preferences lean heavily toward strategy and complexity. The Battle of Polytopia is a favorite, a turn-based strategy game about building civilizations and conquering territories. It's essentially Civilization Light, playable on mobile devices in shorter sessions, but with enough depth to require genuine strategic thinking. Musk's brother Kimball has said that Elon told him Polytopia would teach him to be a CEO, which reveals how even in leisure, Musk sees connections to leadership and decision-making. The game's lessons, as Musk has outlined them, include prioritizing ruthlessly, understanding that empathy is not always an asset in competitive environments, and thinking several moves ahead about resource allocation and territorial control. Elden Ring is another obsession, the sprawling fantasy action game that's notorious for its difficulty and rich lore. Musk has called it a candidate for best game ever, praising its incredible creativity and stunning art. He's talked about the game's themes of defeating internal demons, about the hardest boss battle being the one inside yourself rather than any external enemy. It's simultaneously entertainment and philosophical reflection, a way to engage with narrative and challenge that feels completely different from engineering problems, but exercises similar mental muscles around pattern recognition, learning from failure, and iterative improvement. Diablo 4 represents yet another facet of his gaming interests. This is a loot-driven action RPG where you fight through hordes of enemies, collecting progressively better equipment, optimizing character builds, and tackling increasingly difficult challenges. Musk has achieved ranks in Diablo 4 that place him among the top players globally, which raises eyebrows given that he supposedly runs multiple companies and works 80 to 100 hours per week. Where does he find time to become elite at a video game? The answer is either that he's exceptionally efficient with his time even in leisure, playing in focused bursts and learning optimization strategies quickly, or that his reported work hours are somewhat exaggerated. Probably both are partially true. Overwatch, the team-based first-person shooter, has also featured prominently in his gaming diet. He's tweeted about it, discussed strategies, engaged with the gaming community around it. There's something about the fast-paced coordination required in Overwatch, the need to make split-second decisions in dynamic environments while cooperating with teammates, that clearly appeals to him. It's not the same kind of slow strategic thinking as Polytopia. It's reactive, immediate, testing different cognitive skills. The variety suggests he's not just playing games to pass time, but seeking different types of mental engagement. Grimes, the musician who was his partner and mother of 3 of his children, has said that Musk has no hobbies or ways to relax other than video games, but he takes them so seriously that they become intense rather than relaxing. This is revealing. Even leisure for Musk becomes something approached with intensity and the drive to excel. He doesn't casually play games for entertainment. He plays them seriously, learns them deeply, achieves high rankings. It's the same mindset he applies to everything. If something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. If he's going to spend time gaming, he's going to understand the mechanics, optimize his strategies, and perform at a high level. This intensity in leisure pursuits is characteristic of how his brain operates. There doesn't seem to be a mode where he coasts or does things casually. Everything engages the same drive toward mastery and optimization, which raises questions about whether gaming truly provides rest or if it's just a different form of mental exertion. Probably it's somewhere in between. The games provide escape from work problems, giving his mind different challenges to solve. But they're still challenges, still problems, still requiring intense focus and strategic thinking. It's shu-shi in the sense of variety rather than actual relaxation. Beyond gaming, Musk is also into anime, which might surprise people who only know him from business headlines. He's mentioned watching Death Note, Evangelion, and Your Name with Grimes. Studio Ghibli films like Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke are favorites. There's an appreciation for the creativity and storytelling in anime that you don't get in Western media, the willingness to explore philosophical themes and emotional depths while also being visually stunning. He's also mentioned being obsessed with historical documentaries, particularly about Genghis Khan and the Mongols. This fits with someone who's interested in how ambitious individuals have shaped history, how empires are built and lost, and the strategic thinking that leads to conquest or collapse. Reading remains a constant. Musk is famously well-read, though in recent years he's claimed that modern fiction disappoints him, that the stories in video games have become better and more engaging than what he finds in contemporary novels. Whether this is a fair assessment of modern literature or just reflects his personal preference for interactive narratives is debatable, but it shows how his entertainment choices increasingly favor media that allows agency and engagement rather than passive consumption. Science fiction from earlier eras, particularly Isaac Asimov's Foundation series and Douglas Adams's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, were formative for young Elon and continue to influence his thinking. He's also drawn to biographies and non-fiction books about engineering, physics, and business strategy. Reading before bed is a ritual when his schedule allows, though the definition of before bed is flexible, given that bed might be at 1 or 2 a.m. Music plays a role too, though he's less publicly detailed about his musical tastes. He listens to music in the car, a mix of classical, electronic, and various other genres. His relationship with Grimes, who is a prominent electronic musician, undoubtedly influenced his musical exposure. He's even dabbled in music creation himself, recording an EDM song called Don't Doubt or Vibe on a whim, though that was more novelty than serious artistic pursuit. The point is that music provides another avenue for engaging different parts of his brain, another form of input that isn't about problem solving or optimization, but about aesthetic experience. These evening activities, gaming and reading and watching anime and occasionally listening to music, represent the closest thing to downtime in Musk's schedule. But it's telling that even here, in the hours meant for rest, there's still intensity and engagement. He's not passively watching television while scrolling his phone. He's actively playing games that require skill and concentration. He's reading books that explore ideas. He's watching shows that make him think. Even his relaxation is a form of active mental engagement, just pointed in directions that aren't immediately about building companies or solving engineering problems. And through all of this, work is never completely gone. His phone is always nearby. If something critical happens at any of his companies, he needs to know immediately. A rocket test might produce unexpected results that require his input on next steps. A production line issue might escalate into something needing his decision. A tweet he sent earlier might have blown up in ways that require damage control. The idea of truly unplugging, of being unreachable for hours at a time, isn't compatible with how he's chosen to structure his responsibilities. He's made himself the critical path for decisions at multiple companies, which means those companies need potential access to him around the clock. This creates a lifestyle that many would find unbearably stressful, a constant state of partial attention where you're never fully present in any single moment, because part of your mind is always monitoring for the next crisis. But for Musk, this seems to be how his brain naturally operates anyway. The storm, as he describes it, doesn't stop whether he's working or gaming or reading. His mind is always processing, always making connections, always several steps ahead thinking about implications and possibilities. Work didn't create this cognitive pattern. Work just channeled it into specific problems that happen to involve building electric cars and reusable rockets. By the time he finishes gaming or reading or whatever evening activity has occupied his attention, it's often past midnight. The house or apartment or temporary accommodation is quiet. The world outside has slowed down, though for a global operation like his company's, it's never truly quiet. Somewhere, factories are running third shifts. Engineers in different time zones are working on problems that will be waiting for him tomorrow. Satellites are beaming internet signals. Rockets are being prepared for launches. The empire he's built operates continuously, and he's plugged into it continuously, even in these hours that should be personal. Before sleep, there's one more ritual that he's publicly discussed as important: avoiding food and alcohol for at least 2 to 3 hours before bed. This was an adjustment he made after learning about how eating close to bedtime can cause acid reflux that disrupts sleep quality even if you're not consciously aware of it. He noticed that implementing this rule improved how he felt in the morning, the quality of rest he got from his 6 hours of sleep. It's a small optimization, but small optimizations compound over time. Better sleep means better mental performance the next day, means better decisions, means better outcomes. The marginal gains philosophy that elite athletes use applies to elite workaholics too. His mind is already previewing tomorrow as he prepares for sleep. What meetings are scheduled? What problems need decisions? What fires might need fighting? This preview isn't anxious rumination exactly. It's more like loading the next day's program into memory so that when he wakes up, he can hit the ground running without needing to rebuild context from scratch. His brain will process some of these problems during sleep, working on them unconsciously while he rests. In the morning, he'll wake up and some of the thorny issues from today might have clearer paths forward, insights generated by whatever mysterious process happens in the brain when it's allowed to rest and reorganize. The gaming session winds down, the book gets set aside, the anime episode ends. Elon Musk, somewhere around 1 a.m., finally allows himself to sleep. 6 hours from now, his eyes will open and the phone will be the first thing he reaches for, and the cycle will begin again. The 5-minute blocks, the meetings, the design reviews, the impossible deadlines and the problems no one else knows how to solve, and the tweets that will probably cause controversy, and the relentless forward motion toward goals that most people think are unrealistic. Tomorrow will look almost identical to today, except the specific crises will be different, and the specific decisions will require different information, but the overall pattern will remain the same. This is Elon Musk's day, not just today but most days. A life architected around maximum output and minimum waste, where sleep is calculated to the decimal point and meals are afterthoughts, and relaxation is just another form of intense engagement. Now he sleeps, or at least his body does. Whether his mind ever fully stops is another question entirely. The hours between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. are when Elon Musk technically rests, though rest might be an optimistic description of what happens during those 6 to 6.5 hours of sleep. Sleep for Musk isn't the restorative retreat into oblivion that it is for many people. It's more like a system reboot, a necessary maintenance cycle that his body and brain require to continue functioning at the intensity he demands. He's experimented extensively with sleep duration over the years, and the current 6-hour target represents his findings about his personal minimum effective dose. The bedroom itself is likely unremarkable, wherever he happens to be sleeping that night. Musk isn't known for luxury in his personal spaces. For a period, he famously owned no house at all, having sold his real estate holdings and claiming to live primarily in a small prefabricated home near the SpaceX facility in Texas. Whether that arrangement is still current depends on which reports you believe and when you're asking, but the principle is consistent. Physical comfort and impressive real estate aren't priorities for someone who spends virtually all his waking hours working or thinking about work. The bed is a place to lose consciousness efficiently, not a shrine to rest and relaxation. The sleep environment has been optimized to the extent that Musk pays attention to such things, which isn't extensive. The room is dark and quiet enough to allow sleep, but there aren't elaborate rituals around temperature control or white noise machines or any of the sleep optimization technologies that some executives swear by. He's mentioned using sleep tracking at times, though more out of curiosity about his sleep patterns than from a commitment to improving them beyond the basic calculation of duration. The goal is to get unconscious quickly, stay unconscious for 6 hours, and wake up ready to go. Anything beyond that is optimization at the margins that probably doesn't justify the attention it would require. What happens in Musk's brain during those 6 hours is both ordinary and extraordinary. The ordinary part is the same biological processes that happen for everyone: memory consolidation, cellular repair, hormonal regulation, the various housekeeping tasks that the body needs to perform when it's not being actively used. The extraordinary part is that his brain, which spent the previous 18 hours context switching between electric vehicle production and rocket engineering and social media controversy and business strategy, is processing an inhuman amount of information. The problems he was working on yesterday don't vanish during sleep. They percolate in his unconscious mind, being reorganized, having new connections formed, sometimes emerging as insights upon waking. There's substantial neuroscience research suggesting that sleep is when the brain consolidates learning and makes creative connections between disparate pieces of information. For someone like Musk, who's constantly absorbing technical details across multiple complex domains, sleep is when that information gets integrated into usable mental models. The shower might be where solutions crystallize into consciousness, but sleep is where the groundwork for those solutions gets laid. It's why he's protective of his 6 hours, even when the temptation is strong to cut it shorter and work more. He learned through painful experience that below 6 hours, his mental acuity suffers enough that he gets less done, even with more working hours available. The math of productivity isn't linear. During particularly intense periods, especially during what he called production hell at Tesla, when the Model 3 was ramping up and everything seemed to be going wrong simultaneously, Musk's sleep became even more fragmented and desperate. He's described sleeping on the factory floor, taking naps in sleeping bags stuffed in conference rooms, going days with only a few hours of sleep total. These weren't strategic choices. They were the result of crises that demanded his constant presence and decision-making. Production lines stopped at all hours. Engineering problems emerged in the middle of the night. Supplier issues required immediate calls regardless of time zones. The experience nearly broke him. He's been surprisingly candid in interviews about how unsustainable that period was, how working 120-hour weeks left him not sharper and more effective, but foggy and emotional and making worse decisions. There were reports of him breaking down in tears during interviews, of looking haggard and exhausted in ways that alarmed people who cared about him. His first wife, Justine, had warned years earlier that there were signs of how demanding he would be, how work would consume everything. But it took pushing himself past breaking point to force a recalibration. The lesson he took from that experience wasn't to slow down entirely or to prioritize work-life balance in any conventional sense. It was to work sustainably, which for him meant scaling back from 120 hours to 80 or 90 and protecting the 6 hours of sleep as non-negotiable. This is Musk's version of moderation, still working nearly double what most people consider a full work week, but no longer pushing into territory that causes immediate psychological and physical breakdown. The adjustment came from pragmatism rather than concern for his health per se. He wants to be able to sustain this pace for decades, not burn out after a few years, because the missions he's pursuing aren't short-term projects. Tonight, in this snapshot we're following, his sleep is relatively undisturbed. No 3 a.m. emergencies requiring his immediate attention. No rocket explosions or production disasters that pull him back to consciousness. His phone, always nearby even on the nightstand, stays dark except for the usual accumulation of notifications that can wait until morning. His body cycles through sleep stages, deeper and lighter, alternating. REM, sleep, where dreams happen though he rarely remembers them or discusses them publicly. Physically, he's lying still in a dark room. Mentally, his brain is doing the work that allows him to wake up and immediately return to the intensity without needing a slow warm-up period. The decision to avoid food and alcohol before bed, which he implemented after learning about their effects on sleep quality, is paying dividends in ways he probably isn't consciously aware of. His sleep, while short, is more restorative than it would be if he'd eaten a late meal or had more drinks. The acid reflux that would disturb his sleep isn't happening. The sleep cycles are completing more fully. When 7 a.m. arrives and his eyes open, he'll feel as rested as 6 hours allows, ready to immediately check his phone and dive into the next iteration of his relentless schedule. There's something almost mechanical about how he treats sleep, optimizing it the same way he optimizes everything else. Most people view sleep as a biological necessity to be enjoyed, a pleasure of comfort and rest. Musk views it as a required maintenance cycle to be executed efficiently. He's not interested in sleeping more than he has to, because every hour of sleep is an hour not spent on the companies, on the missions, on the problems that won't solve themselves. But he's also learned that sleeping less than he needs is counterproductive, so he's found his equilibrium through experimentation and disciplined adherence to that target. As morning approaches, as the 6 hours near completion, his brain begins the ascent back toward consciousness. There's no alarm in the traditional sense, because his internal clock, calibrated by years of maintaining this schedule, wakes him naturally around 7 a.m. The light through whatever window is nearby doesn't matter much. His body knows it's time to wake because 6 hours have passed and there's work to be done. The transition from sleep to waking is rapid for him, not the gradual fuzzy emergence that many people experience. His eyes open, his mind, which never fully stopped working even in sleep, kicks immediately into higher gear. The storm, briefly calmed by unconsciousness, begins to swirl again. And before his feet touch the floor, before any other action, his hand reaches for the phone. The day has begun again. Another Tuesday or Monday or Friday, differentiated only by which office he'll be in and which company's crises will dominate his attention. The 5-minute blocks are waiting, a calendar filled to the margins with decisions and meetings and problems that need his specific combination of technical knowledge, strategic vision, and willingness to make hard calls that other people avoid. The missions are waiting: electric vehicles to transform transportation, reusable rockets to make humanity multiplanetary, neural interfaces to keep humans relevant in an AI-dominated future, tunnels to solve urban traffic, solar power to enable sustainable energy. Sleep is over. The maintenance cycle is complete. Elon Musk is awake, and the world, for better or worse, will feel the effects of his consciousness for the next 18 hours until sleep claims him again. This is his life, not occasionally or during crunch times, but consistently, day after day, week after week, year after year. It's the life he's chosen, or perhaps the life his brain's wiring demanded, a life where work and purpose are so intertwined that separation becomes meaningless. He climbs out of bed and moves toward the shower, toward the donut or the skipped breakfast, toward the first calls and meetings and decisions of a new day that will look remarkably like yesterday and tomorrow and every other day, in the relentless calendar of someone who's decided that changing the world is more important than comfort, balance, or conventional wisdom about how human beings should live. As the evening hours stretched into night and now into the next dawn, we've traveled through a day in the life of Elon Musk, perhaps the most polarizing and peculiar figure in contemporary business and technology. What we've witnessed isn't a life that most people would envy, despite the wealth and influence it commands. It's a life of relentless intensity, where every waking hour is optimized for output, where meals are interruptions and sleep is a calculated compromise, and relaxation is just another form of engagement requiring focus and achievement. The structure of his days, broken into those famous 5-minute increments, reveals an approach to time management that's simultaneously brilliant and borderline inhuman. It works in the sense that he manages to operate multiple groundbreaking companies simultaneously when conventional wisdom says one such company should consume a CEO's entire bandwidth. Tesla alone would be enough to occupy most executives fully. SpaceX's ambitions would be all-consuming for anyone else. Yet Musk runs both, plus his involvement in X, Neuralink, the Boring Company, and various other ventures, all while maintaining at least the appearance of being technically engaged rather than just ceremonially present. The cost of this approach is visible in the cracks when you look closely enough. The near breakdown during Tesla's production hell, the fractured relationships with multiple partners, and the complex custody arrangements with 14 children, the public controversies and erratic behavior that occasionally emerge, particularly on social media, where his unfiltered thoughts create regular storms of criticism and concern. The physical toll visible in photographs from his most stressed periods. This isn't sustainable for most humans, and it's arguably not fully sustainable even for him, existing as it does in a state of controlled burnout that could tip into actual crisis at any moment. His approach to food exemplifies the broader philosophy. Treat everything, even biological necessities, as resources to be optimized rather than experiences to be enjoyed. The daily donut isn't really about the donut. It's a small rebellion against health optimization, a declaration that he'll make his own choices even if they're not optimal. The skipped meals and business dinners and intermittent fasting aren't really about nutrition. They're about extracting maximum working hours from the day while providing minimum necessary fuel. This works in the short and medium term. Whether it works over decades remains to be seen, though Musk seems unconcerned about longevity beyond maintaining functional capacity long enough to achieve his missions. The meeting philosophy he's developed and enforced at his companies is perhaps his most exportable innovation. The rules are simple enough that anyone could implement them. Keep meetings small, keep them short, make them optional for people not contributing, eliminate recurring meetings when the urgent matter is resolved. But implementation requires cultural change that's difficult to achieve. Most organizations are addicted to meetings precisely because they feel like work even when they're not productive. It takes leadership willing to be aggressive about time protection to actually make these rules stick. Musk's willingness to walk out of his own meetings if they're no longer valuable sends a signal that reverberates through his organizations. Your time actually matters. Don't waste it on ceremonial presence. The division of his week between companies, with specific days allocated to Tesla versus SpaceX, represents another optimization that seems obvious in hindsight, but requires discipline to maintain. By batching his focus on each company, he reduces the cognitive switching costs that would come from bouncing between them randomly. Mondays and Fridays in SpaceX mode, Tuesdays through Thursdays in Tesla mode, creates rhythm and predictability that allows him to dive deep into each company's particular challenges without the chaos of constant context switching. This wouldn't work for companies that are closely related, but Tesla and SpaceX operate in sufficiently different domains that the separation makes sense. The evening activities, particularly the gaming, reveal something essential about how his mind works. These aren't casual pastimes engaged in mindlessly to decompress. They're intense pursuits where he achieves elite performance levels, where the same drive toward mastery that characterizes his work manifests in virtual worlds. The games he chooses, strategy-focused challenges that require planning and optimization, aren't accidental preferences. They engage his mind in similar ways to his work while pointing those energies toward problems that have no real-world stakes. It's the closest he comes to true rest, though even here, the intensity suggests his brain doesn't have a relaxation mode, only different types of engagement. His sleep habits represent the ultimate optimization challenge. How little can you sleep while maintaining peak cognitive function? 6 to 6.5 hours is his answer, derived through years of experimentation, including painful experiences with too little sleep. It's more than some famous entrepreneurs and historical figures have claimed to need, less than sleep scientists recommend for optimal health. It's Musk's personal equilibrium, the point where additional sleep feels wasteful, but less sleep impairs performance. Whether this is sustainable for decades is an open question, but it sustained him this far. The relationship with his children, complex and sometimes controversial, reflects the broader challenge of integrating human connection with this level of work intensity. He sees them when custody allows and his schedule permits. He takes them to factories and launches, exposing them to his world. He believes deeply in the importance of having children, viewing it as essential to humanity's future. But the day-to-day reality of parenting is necessarily constrained by the demands he's placed on himself. Whether his children will view this as acceptable or damaging probably varies by child and won't be fully knowable for years. His public comments suggest he views himself as a good father within the constraints of his choices, but those constraints are severe. The missions driving all of this, the reasons he structures his life so intensely around work, are simultaneously inspiring and troubling, depending on your perspective. Accelerating the transition to sustainable energy through electric vehicles and solar power addresses one of humanity's most pressing challenges. Making life multi-planetary through SpaceX's work could be the difference between human extinction and human survival if Earth faces catastrophic events. Developing neural interfaces to keep humans competitive with artificial intelligence might preserve human agency in a future dominated by AI. These are genuinely important problems, and Musk has put his time, money, and energy toward solving them in ways that have produced real results, not just promises. But the personal cost and the costs imposed on people in his orbit raise questions about whether the ends justify the means. Former employees describe burnout and feeling used as ammunition, expended and discarded once they've given what he needed. His romantic partners describe relationships where work always came first, where even time spent together was often interrupted by his attention to business matters. His children navigate a father whose attention is perhaps the scarcest resource in the world, divided among multiple companies and 14 kids and public controversies. The balance sheet of Musk's life shows massive positive impacts on technology and industry, alongside personal costs that many would find unacceptable. What we can say with certainty is that Elon Musk's daily routine is not a template for others to follow, at least not in its totality. The 5-minute rule, the meeting philosophy, the focus on first principles thinking. These are exportable lessons that can improve productivity for anyone willing to implement them. But the 80 to 100-hour work weeks, the sleep optimization, the treatment of food as pure fuel, the subordination of all personal considerations to mission objectives, this represents an extreme that's neither healthy nor desirable for most humans. Musk himself has acknowledged that people probably wouldn't want to be him if they truly understood what being him entails. The storm in his mind, the inability to shut off, the constant processing and optimization, these aren't features to envy. They're characteristics that drive his behavior, perhaps compulsions as much as choices. The day we've explored, from the 7 a.m. phone check through the morning shower and the 5-minute blocks of meetings and the factory floor investigations and the design reviews and the skipped meals and the evening gaming sessions and finally the calculated 6 hours of sleep, this is not exceptional for him. This is Tuesday. Tomorrow will be Wednesday, with a similar structure but different specific fires to fight. Next week will be more of the same. Next year will continue the pattern unless something breaks, either in his companies or in him, forcing a change in the equation. As we close this extended observation of a day in Elon Musk's life, the sun is rising again on another morning. Somewhere, his phone is already buzzing with notifications accumulated overnight. His eyes are opening, his mind emerging from 6 hours of unconscious processing to return to the conscious storm. The missions await. The problems haven't solved themselves. The 5-minute blocks on the calendar are lined up like dominoes, each one demanding its precise moment of attention. And Elon Musk, love him or loathe him, celebrate him or criticize him, is waking up to do it all again because this is who he is and what he's chosen, and the world, for better or worse, is different because of that choice. If you've made it this far in our journey through his day, thank you for your attention and patience. This is the kind of deep dive we create here at A Day Long Ago, exploring how people, whether from centuries past or the present moment, actually spend their time, what drives them, what cost they pay for their ambitions. If you found this valuable or interesting or at least compelling in some way, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Drop a comment telling us which other contemporary or historical figures you'd like us to explore. And maybe take a moment to appreciate that your own day, however stressful or busy it might feel, probably offers more balance and breathing room than what we've just witnessed. The machines of progress that Musk has built, the electric vehicles and reusable rockets and neural interfaces and tunnel-boring operations, they continue operating while we consider what they've cost and what they've achieved. Whether the trade-offs are worth it depends on values that differ from person to person. But the day itself, the structure and intensity and relentless optimization, that's the price Elon Musk has decided to pay. Whether it's the price anyone should pay is a question for philosophers and psychologists, and everyone grappling with the modern tension between achievement and well-being. For now, we simply observe. This is how one person has chosen to spend his finite allocation of time on Earth, burning bright and fast and intensely, hoping to bend the arc of human civilization toward his vision of the future before his time runs out. Good luck, Elon. The world is watching.